CBS Atlanta News presents Public Affairs on Peach.
It's a sport that brings fans to their feet, cheering for the passes, runs, and sacks at all levels. Blows to the head are part of any contact sport, but none more than in football, making headlines, concussions, and the potentially long-lasting debilitating effects.
Well, I think it's a public health crisis because it is known to be something that is occurring on athletic fields. But these same kinds of injury are occurring in all recreational sports as well.
New research continues to emerge, and that's why more attention is being paid to what happens at the youth level and in the aftermath of an athletic career, not only in football, but in all sports. Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Jennifer Merrily, Special Projects Reporter at CBS Atlanta. On-field concussions and hits to the head are bound to happen in practice and in games. Football players, they know they may leave the game with a broken body, but what about a broken brain? Here's what the experts are saying.
One of the things that excites audiences about football is one of the things hurting players. The hallmark of the sport is being able to play through pain. Researchers found concussions and the repetitive hits to the head over the course of a career can result in irreversible brain damage and a devastating degenerative disease.
How fragile is the brain?
Well, the brain is about the consistency of Jell-O. It's solid, but you can poke your finger and it will push right into it.
Dr. Robert Cantu is a renowned neurosurgeon. He also serves as a senior advisor for the NFL's Head, Neck, and Spine Committee.
What do you normally do when someone has a concussion?
Well, the most important thing is to recognize it. The majority of concussions are still not recognized on athletic fields. You should remove them from practice or play, and they should not be allowed to go back that day.
In 2009, the NFL changed its concussion policy to reduce the number of helmet-to-helmet hits. The most significant change, according to Cantu, came in 2011, moving the kickoff from the 30 to the 35-yard line.
And that's the most violent play in all of football, because individuals are coming at a full head of speed, often in opposite directions.
I always study the brain with the patient in mind, trying to solve the mystery of why they were acting that way.
Neuropathologist Dr. Ann McKee has studied the brain for nearly 3 decades. She heads up the brain bank at the VA hospital in Bedford, Massachusetts, and along with Dr. Cantu, is one of the co-founders of Boston University's Center for the Study of Traumatic Encephalopathy. Most recently, she began studying the brains of deceased NFL players.
What have you been able to see in some of these football players' brains?
Well, I think the thing we've been seeing over and over again, which is very disturbing, is we see this neurodegenerative disease, this condition called chronic traumatic encephalopathy, which is characterized by a buildup of this protein called tau. TAU.
So far, out of 85 brains McKee has studied, 68 of them were diagnosed with CTE, 64 were athletes, and 50 of those were football players. CTE is a diagnosis that, at this point, can only be made after death. We were with McKee as she examined the brain of an unidentified former NFL player.
In a lot of ways, this is a gorgeous brain. Cutting into it will give us an idea if there's been structural brain changes. And if we see structural brain changes, then almost undoubtedly they're microscopic changes. Well, the most notable thing is really the size of those mammillary bodies. They're very small. I would expect this person to be at least impaired cognitively, if not demented.
And would that be the same tau protein that you were seeing?
Yeah, if it's CTE, which I think it's going to be.
McKee won't know definitively until she completes her tests. More than 600 people have signed up to be part of the brain registry to donate their brains after death, including dozens of current NFL players, other pro athletes, and members of the general public.
Who else can be affected?
Well, we're seeing it in anyone who's had repetitive head injury.
That includes athletes of other sports. CTE was first diagnosed in boxers. It's been found in hockey players and members of the military who have been exposed to trauma in combat. McKee even found CTE in an 18-year-old high school football player.
And right here in Georgia, a state-of-the-art concussion institute that will offer a comprehensive approach to concussion management and sports rehabilitation, all under one roof. It's the first in the state of Georgia and only third in the country. The Concussion Institute at Gwinnett Medical Center in Duluth is 2 years in the making. The institute opens this month with 8 exam rooms, 3 therapy rooms, plus a host of trained staff, including neuropsychologist Dr. Marla Shapiro. And Dr. Shapiro, thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we know that concussions have been making headlines, but players have been taking hard hits for a long time in the NFL. Why do you think now it's really in the spotlight?
I think because what we're starting to see are the long-term cumulative effects. These players that have been taking hits for so many years, where there hasn't been the attention paid to appropriate diagnosis and management, and so they've continued to play through the hits. I mean, when I was in high school, you got your bell rung, you'd be back on the field and told to shake it off, son, and get back out there. And now we're recognizing that's a concussion. We're treating it differently. But thanks to these pro athletes, unfortunately, who have suffered, the attention is coming to the effects of concussion, and particularly the cumulative effects.
Why is concussion management and concussion awareness so important at all levels?
You know, as I've said to you earlier, what I do isn't necessarily rocket science. We know that if you rest the brain and you rest the body, you get better. And so management and education to me are essential to prevent these long-term complications. We know that youth athletes in particular are at risk for catastrophic brain injuries. It can be fatal if they're concussed again before they fully recovered. So there's clearly the life-threatening aspect of awareness and management, but also, quite frankly, we want to get kids back to life, back to the classroom, back to the sports they love, but without appropriate education on what to do and how to manage it, without the appropriate amount of rest, they're going to have the same long-term problems we're seeing in older athletes.
And you've touched on this, but what can happen if concussion is not treated properly?
The worst case scenario, second impact syndrome, which is the catastrophic and sometimes fatal brain injury that can occur if you're reconcussed. That's a worst case scenario. It's very rare, but we don't know who's most at risk. More commonly, though, are the things that we do see more often in the paper. The kids that months and months after their concussion, they're not, their grades are still dropping, they don't feel quite right, they have chronic headaches, chronic mood things. These long-term complications that in most cases don't have to happen if they're managed properly from the outset.
When should someone go get checked out? When should they come see a doctor?
Immediately. Fortunately, in Gwinnett County, in particular, Gwinnett Medical Center has had a wonderful athletic training program with athletic trainers in all our high schools for several years that predates the opening of the Concussion Institute. So we have sign-line sports medicine professionals that are there to evaluate. But if you're not in a high school, you're not at in a game or a league that has your own athletic trainer, go to your pediatrician, go to the nearest emergency room, make sure they've ruled out a more serious insult, but then come and see us. Let us work with you, with your coaches, with your school. It's not just getting kids back on the field. We want to get them back to the classroom, back to life as quickly as possible, but as safely as possible. And
the Concussion Institute opens this month. Dr. Shapiro, thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
And for more information about the Concussion Institute at Gwinnett Medical Center, go to GwinnettSportsMed.com/concussions or call the number on your screen, 678-312-7880. And coming up, we take a look at UGA's concussion policy, how the dogs stack up compared to other NCAA schools, and how the state of Georgia recently adopted a law to make sports safer for young athletes. Stay with us.